This podcast contains plot spoilers for movies, television, and has numerous pop culture references. Adult language and mature themes are present. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to a podcast of Rare Antiquities, Episode 3. My name is Harry, and I'm one of the hosts of this podcast.
And I am your co-host, Geoff.
Today, we will be reviewing the cult movie Leprechaun, starring Warwick Davis and Jennifer Aniston in her breakthrough performance. This movie was released in 1993 by Trimark Pictures and was written and directed by Mark Jones. So, for those who listened last episode, I chose this one because it was something always on my radar to watch, but I never did because I feared it would be too bad of a movie to get through. So I think it'll be interesting today to go through this movie and see if there's anything of interest here or not. And Geoff, I figured, as I mentioned last time, this was a movie I thought and pretty much had a good educated guess that you had never seen before as well.
That is correct. I have never seen Leprechaun before. I don't know how I missed it. I really don't know how I missed it the first time around, but this was a new one.
So that was obviously another question. Do you have any, obviously if you haven't seen it, you haven't had any direct memories of this movie, but you laughed pretty hard when I mentioned it as my pick last time. So you obviously knew of its existence. So do you have any kind of memory of when you've even first heard or of Leprechaun or the series or anything like that?
Well, I'm aware of, every couple of years it seems like a Leprechaun movie comes back around, and I was always aware of it being around, and I had the same thought that a lot of people have when some ridiculous sequel comes out is, how are they making another one of these? But other than that, no, I was aware of it coming out at the time, and I would have been at the age when, this type of movie probably might have appealed to me at the time, but somehow I let it slip through the cracks.
Yes, as did I. The funny thing is,
what are your memories?
Well, I don't really have any memories per se about Leprechaun. I mean, I guess when Netflix hit, I always saw it out there under the horror movies, and it was like, oh, Jennifer Aniston's on the cover of this, and kind of piqued my interest because I knew of her, and it's always kind of fascinating to see all these celebrities. I mean, famous actors. I wouldn't necessarily call her very famous, but it's always interesting to see where they started. And it seemed, I just guessed, I didn't even have to know that probably was like one of her early movies at the time, because obviously she was on Friends, so after that she was a bit more high profile. So I would venture an educated guess without even looking at anything on the internet that she probably wouldn't have come close to a movie like this post Friends or during her Friends run.
Yeah, she looked pretty young. Credit to her for going on to bigger and better things after a small movie like this one. It's an interesting place for an actor to get a start.
Yeah, and she's not the first celebrity to do that. I think, wasn't Matthew McConaughey's first real role was on like a reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre or one of the crappy sequels or something like that?
Yeah, he's another one of those guys that turned an interesting start into a famous career, which is probably a better place for an actor to start. If you think about some of the actors who start off in big blockbusters, usually their career trajectory goes in the opposite direction.
That's probably true. That's probably true for most people, but I mean, it's still a needle in the haystack for these celebrities to make it past any point, right, after a first breakthrough hit. But anyways,
I think they wish it was a needle in a haystack, but anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to my memories, every time I think Leprechaun, I always go back and think of the Treehouse of Horror episode from The Simpsons where Homer gets cursed by the gypsy and he releases a leprechaun on her. It doesn't work out for him. They end up like having sex in front of him. It's like, ah-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. It's like, and then Lenny and Carl's comments is like, I got hexed by a troll once. The leprechaun fixed that right up. And then I think Lenny says, the next best thing is Jesus. He's like 6 leprechauns.
Didn't he lure the leprechaun with like a box of Lucky Charms or something in that episode too?
Yes, he did.
That's pretty fun.
Oh, yeah, it was really good. So before we get into a plot summary, I just wanted to ask, obviously, educated guess from both of us, it's quite obvious this movie is a low-budget B-movie horror. So did you go into this movie with any preconceived notions here, or did you really go into it with an open mind?
Well, I totally went into it with an open mind, and I think that's in the spirit of what we're trying to do on the show. Obviously, I knew it wasn't going to be a top-of-my-list type of show, but tried to go into it to watch it for what it was and to have a good time doing it.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I tried to go into it with as much of an open mind as possible, so it'll be interesting to see if, what our thoughts are throughout the movie and at the end. So should I just get right into the plot summary here?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we open the movie with Irishman Daniel O'Grady, who returns home from Ireland and tells his wife he has acquired gold. Apparently, an evil leprechaun stowed away in his suitcase and has come for revenge to get his gold back, because you never, ever steal a leprechaun's gold. O'Grady has hid the gold, and the leprechaun kills his wife, but then O'Grady is able to trap the leprechaun in a wooden crate with the power of Lucky Charms. I mean, a 4-leaf clover, just prior to him having a stroke. So long as the clover is on the crate, the leprechaun will remain trapped forever. Fast forward 10 years, and some guy and his daughter Tori, played by Jennifer Aniston, rent this house for the summer. Tori doesn't want to be anywhere near this dirty house, but quickly changes her mind when she meets muscle-clad Nathan, who seems to be painting the house. Nathan has a painting business with his younger brother Alex and a mentally challenged friend Ozzy. Ozzy accidentally releases the leprechaun when he swipes off the 4-leaf clover on the top of the crate, and the hilarity ensues. Ozzy, being a dimwit who seems to like telling false stories, cannot convince anyone a leprechaun is present. But then all of a sudden, a cheap-looking rainbow appears, and Ozzy and Alex run to the end of the rainbow, while Nathan is doing the same thing to stay behind and ogle Tori. Ozzy and Alex find a truck with gold in it at the end of the rainbow and decide to hide the gold in a well, but not before Ozzy accidentally eats one piece. Alex keeps another to get it appraised to see its real worth. After killing a police officer, the leprechaun then returns back to the O'Grady house to continue his search for his gold. After injuring Nathan, Ozzy and Alex tell the truth about finding the gold, and Tori then returns the gold from the well to the leprechaun. But the leprechaun realizes that one piece is still missing, the one Ozzy swallowed. So he continues his torment on these folks. Tori, upon learning that O'Grady himself somewhat trapped the leprechaun, visits him in a nursing home, only to find the leprechaun there and O'Grady almost dead. Before dying, O'Grady tells Tori that she needs a 4-leaf clover to kill the leprechaun. Tori returns home, and surprisingly, there is a 4-leaf clover patch on the farm, and through the power of belief, one actual 4-leaf clover is found. After a small chase, Alex sticks the clover to a wad of gum and shoots it in the leprechaun's mouth, taking away his power. The leprechaun falls down the well, and Nathan then pours gasoline inside the well and lights it, blowing it up. The police then, of course, arrive, and all is well. The leprechaun appears to be dead, until you hear its voiceover saying it will not rest until it gets all of its gold. The end. So, yes. So hearkening back to episode 1, when we talked about UHF's plot summary, after hearing this plot summary, the first thing that comes to my mind is, again, the plot is very thin, like real thin, fucking anorexic. So we can already tell there probably isn't a lot to take away from this movie, but in UHF's case, there was so much more to the plot to make the movie enjoyable than something we recommended. So the initial question I have for you then, Jeff, is just based on the plot summary, what are your thoughts? What are just your initial thoughts?
Well, if I were to take the plot summary out of context here and I hadn't watched this film, sure, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot going on here. Sounds pretty ridiculous setup, but I'll give them credit for being creative. I never would have thought of a leprechaun as a object to be feared. So that was kind of a neat take on it there, I suppose. But
yeah.
All of the other leprechaun tropes, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, all that kind of stuff. I think if I'm listening to this plot summary, I'm a little confused that this is supposed to be a horror film.
Yes, and we'll talk about that as we get through it. Just moving on, based on our other podcast, we'll just lay out some trivia for any folks who are listening, and maybe I'll dazzle you with some trivia here, Jeff. So this movie had...
Favorite.
This movie had a budget of $900,000, and according to Box Office Mojo, its domestic gross was just around $8.5 million. So I guess not taking into consideration any international markets or home video, that seemed to be a pretty good profit for the studio, and thus I guess that's what spawned all those sequels that came. So this was also released in 93, and it was released in early January. I took a look at the movie release schedule in that year, and not a lot of movies were around then. I think it was the only movie that opened on that particular weekend. But then just out of curiosity, I went to October, and there was no horror movies in October, so I'm wondering if they may have had a little bit more success if they did release in October, because, January seems to be a bit perplexing to release a movie like this, in my opinion. So, yeah. Also, Trimark Pictures, surprisingly, released an 8-page prequel comic book prior to the release of this film. And it depicts how Dan O'Grady got the gold from the Leprechaun. I kind of wanted to point that out because they seem to be a pioneer for what a lot of major studios are doing now for blockbuster films, is that they're releasing prequel material. A lot of movies now do that through, like, you say, superhero movies or science fiction movies. They seem to be releasing a lot of prequel material. We talked about a few episodes ago about, The Force Awakens coming out soon, and man, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's being released prior to that movie. So it's interesting to see that a low budget B horror movie like this actually released something like that just to get marketing out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because you're right. That's a really common thing to do today. But back then, that's got to be one of the first movies that ever did something like that. So that's really fascinating. And for a movie like this, that considering when the movie was released in the year, and that's not usually a time that a studio is going to release its A-list stuff, so that's a big promotional item to put the time and money into. So that's pretty neat, man. I think we got to get our hands on that comic book. We should really go and parse that one. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll do a review on that. But it's only 8 pages.
I mean, it's only 8 pages long. So
yeah, you'd think it'd just be a comic strip in a newspaper or something.
Well, I mean, obviously the Leprechaun's pretty shitty at his job. I mean, if it only took 8 pages of a comic book for that old guy to get the gold out of him, I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it would be interesting. So the Leprechaun, as most geeks would know, is played by Warwick Davis, and he's most notable for his breakthrough role as Wicket, the Ewok in Return of the Jedi, or his role in Willow. Surprisingly, I've never seen Willow, but I heard that he had a fairly large role, live-action role in that one. But from the research I've done, this Leprechaun role seems to be one of his more favorites because it was so different than anything else, and he got to stretch his acting. So moving on to Jennifer Aniston, it's quite obvious that this is one of her first major roles. Just from IMDb, this is her first major role. She didn't really star in anything prior to this. And the year after, she landed the role on Friends, so it's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if this movie actually helped land her that role. We'll get into her acting in this movie, so we'll see what happens here. So this movie also is classified technically as a horror comedy. So what do you think about that, Jeff? Do you think that's an accurate label?
Yeah, I think that regardless of how well the jokes hit, that's clearly the tone that they're establishing here. It is a horror comedy, which is an odd genre in and of itself, but I'd say that that's pretty accurate. Yeah,
it is completely accurate. And what was interesting, I was listening to an interview on YouTube from Warwick Davis himself, and he was saying that actually pretty much all the gory shots that you see, and there's not that many in this movie, they all came on reshoots because the studio felt that there was absolutely zero aspects of horror to this film. So I found that quite interesting. So also, just for your information, the Leprechaun's name, even though it's never mentioned in any of the Leprechaun movies, his name is Lubden. So just in case you were curious. And then discussing the director, Mark Jones, this really, and not surprisingly, is his claim to fame. Previously, he was just working as a writer on children's cartoons like Scooby-Doo, Super Friends, and I guess he wrote some episodes of The Fall Guy and shows like A-Team in the 80s. So that was pretty much all he's done in his life. And I think he's had some hand and involvement in all the Leprechaun sequels as well. But this was his, I guess, creative thought, his creation in a sense, to make this movie. And so he was involved in the rest. So speaking of the sequels, this movie did lead to 5 sequels. And I think one of them is another one's coming as it's getting a reboot, of course. So only the sequel Leprechaun 2 was released in theaters, and not surprisingly, the rest would be direct-to-video ones. But just for your amusement, here are the titles for the sequels, in case you don't already know. So Leprechaun 2, Leprechaun 3, pretty standard. Leprechaun 4, In Space. Leprechaun 5, In the Hood. Leprechaun...
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Yes. And then Leprechaun 6, Back in the Hood. So
that's right. I remember that stuff. Isn't there a Leprechaun Origins too?
Yes, and that was what the reboot is called. I don't know if it's out. I found it strange. Like, I couldn't find enough material on the internet to say if the reboot has been released or if it's still underway. But apparently it's been co-financed or co-produced by WWE Studios. So that's all I need to know. Stay clear.
Yeah, that's right. I remember hearing about that. Yeah. They're certainly spreading their wings there into some classic quality entertainment there. Kind of fits, I guess.
Yes. So, just based on that trivia, is there anything that stands out for you there, or do you want to just get right into the meat and potatoes of the movie?
I really love the sequel names. You know what? Warwick Davis isn't the type of actor to get top billing in a movie, so good for him. I forgot about Willow. That's interesting to remember that as well.
Have you seen that?
He was. Yeah, I have seen Willow. Yeah, I have seen Willow. I don't know that it's a film you're going to enjoy. We could probably break that one down sometime too. I was surprised to hear the box office numbers there. That's a pretty low budget movie made for under $1 million in the 90s. That's pretty modest budget, and considering what it returned, like that's a smash hit.
Yeah, for a studio, that's a smash hit.
I did not expect that. Yeah.
No, and I think even Leprechaun 2. If I'm just going off the top of my head now because I didn't write this down, it made over $2 million, and I would assume that the budget would be roughly the same, and that's just domestic gross. Yeah. So, I mean, then after that, it's quite obvious they said, okay, now we're cutting it tight, so then we'll go all direct to video, right? But to me, $900,000 on this movie is not surprising. It seems there was very few set pieces here, so I don't think they blew their budget.
Yeah,
it shows. Yeah, there's not a lot of sets in this movie, and we can maybe talk about that. So how about we go straight into the movie? So as usual, we break this up into 3 acts, and we'll do some analysis on each of these acts. So Act 1, I just want to get right into the meat and potatoes of this movie right now. Jennifer Aniston, she's hot.
She was looking good. She was looking really good, man. I never really was that much into her on Friends, but changed my mind after watching this one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's literally the meat and potatoes in the movie right there.
Yeah.
I hate to pander to the lowest common denominator for the podcast, but I can't help it. That's the first thing I wanted to mention right there. So one of the things that the movie does well, I even though it's very quick, I do like the set piece. The leprechaun starts on the stairs. I guess it's a lair of his, and he's, it's like my precious, about his gold, and he's going into a little monologue about no one should steal his gold from him, otherwise he'll curse him. I did like the effects in this scene. I don't know about you. I talked about a cheesy rainbow later on in the movie, but there's an actual pretty good effect here with a little bit of a rainbow in his lair here and a little bit of glitter on his hat. I know it's not the best effects, but for a movie like this, I was actually impressed in this scene. To me, it seemed all the budget went into this shot. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I really thought it was an interesting little tidbit at the start. I wasn't quite sure what we were looking at. At first I thought, maybe we're back in time or something at the start here, but it was kind of a neat little bit to put in there. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think it set it up really well. And then it cuts straight into the opening credits, and the first thing that, hits me right away is that Warwick Davis gets top billing. So, and that's awesome. I'm proud of the little guy. I mean, he is a little person just doing side characters in other movies, as we mentioned, and now he gets top billing here, and that impressed me. What's your thoughts on that, Art?
Oh, I completely agree. That was actually the first thing I wrote down about this when I was taking my notes, is top billing for Warwick Davis. I mean, good for him.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would have known his name best from Return of the Jedi, but certainly he's buried under a lot of makeup here.
Yes.
I thought he's holding himself fairly well.
Yeah, and we can break this down a little bit further, but I wanted to talk, because obviously we talked about him on the stairs, and he's doing his little monologue. Is this his voice? Do you think this is his voice, or did they pull a David Prowse on the guy?
Oh, that's a good question. We should check the credits. I was under the impression it was his voice.
I think so. I would be surprised.
I mean, he's a little person. He's not a mute, dude. Like, he can talk. It's not like he's severely disabled or something.
You pulling out the whiskey to get through this podcast?
What's that? No, of course not.
I'm just kidding. I just heard a little cork go off in the background. I've already got mine here. It's chilling on the rocks, so it's good. So beyond that, so now we cut straight to this Irish guy, Dan O'Grady, comes back to the States to his wife. I guess he was in Ireland, and of course he's Irish. It's got to start out this way. And he obviously says he's found some gold, and he brings it back, and now all of a sudden they're all rich. And then we get our first introduction to the leprechaun, who seemed to be stowaway in his suitcase. And a dear old wifey sees him first, and she falls backwards, breaks her neck. So what did you think of this whole introduction here?
Because it's, obviously the opening of the movie, we've got the setup. I'm a little confused at this point. I am wondering where he got the gold, because I didn't have the benefit of reading this introductory comic book. But I guess if you're going to introduce your villain, he's got to kill somebody right off the top. And her neck was broken in half. Going down those stairs. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that I did notice out of this scene here is that I love how when Daniel O'Grady comes back and he's drunk, and he reveals the gold, he goes, "Gold!" It's like he must have come from a soccer match. It must have come from a soccer match, right, over in Ireland. It's like, "Gold!"
Yeah.
But
bold move there, having the drunk Irishman too. I mean, that's a real creative choice on their part.
Yeah, they got to get the stereotypes down in this one. The only thing
with the leprechaun, stereotypes are all in bounds at this.
Yes. The one thing I did notice here is that the leprechaun really, to me, didn't seem all that scary. I did love how he's interested in tea, but his introduction really isn't scary at all. And the other thing I noted here is that, so I'm guessing the four-leaf clover obviously is his kryptonite. So I was half expecting as Dan O'Grady pulled it out and was walking towards him, I was expecting him to say, "This old, diseased maniac would be your banker." Because I see the leprechaun, have that Christopher Reeve look. It's like, no, he's got the hand up and he's backing up with his mouth gaping open. And it's like, that's the first thing that hit me. This old, diseased man.
Put it around his neck with a big chain on it.
Yeah, that's what he should have done. Otisburg. So
that's funny, man. I wrote that down. Four-leaf clover is his kryptonite. So that's exactly what we were looking at here.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty obvious. So I do have a question for you, something that I didn't understand, and I thought I'd run this by you. So O'Grady does shoot him, does trap him in the crate and puts the clover on there, which is fine. I understand that. But how do the bullets work in this universe for the leprechaun? If he has the four-leaf clover, do these bullets work or they don't work? I'm a little confused. Do you know? Did you make any sense of this?
I couldn't make a lot of sense of it. It's like, I'm holding the four-leaf clover, so my bullets carry the power of the four-leaf clover. I would have figured as soon as those bullets are out of range. What's the range of a four-leaf clover? I guess that's the real question you got to ask.
Those are pretty small. Those are pretty small little flowers. So I mean,
they are. They're not
little plants.
Well, they pack a lot of punch, man. The three-leaf clovers don't pack a lot of punch, but the four-leaf ones, I figure at least a 20-foot radius power circle on those.
I guess. And then
it's like a vampire with a cross. I mean, I don't know. It's in the room.
Yeah, I guess if it's there, it works.
Yeah.
Good enough. Stretching it. So, anyways, O'Grady gets a stroke, I guess, before he could light up the house or light up the crate, and I guess the leprechaun caused that to happen, cursed him. So then we fast forward 10 years later, so they get to the place, and she hates it because she's from high society LA, I guess. And then she doesn't want to stay there for the summer, but then she bumps into Nathan, who's the, I guess the beefcake of the movie for her. And he has a younger brother, Alex, and a mentally challenged friend, Ozzy. So I have a quick question for you. Have you ever seen this actor, Nathan, before? Because the minute I saw him, he was familiar, but I could never quite place him until I did the research. Do you know where he's from?
No, I don't know where he's from, but I had the exact same thought, is that I knew him from somewhere. So hit us with some trivia, man.
Okay. Star Trek Next Generation, Picard's son. Fake Picard's son.
Oh, right.
That's him. Same actor.
The fake son, yeah. Okay, fake son. Yeah, I could totally see it now.
Yeah, now you can see it.
Did he do anything else?
No, I mean, he's still acting today, but he's doing really minor work. I feel sorry for the guy. He doesn't seem to be able to get into any TV series long term. It's like one episode here and something, one episode there and something. He's kind of just all over the place. So feel sorry for the guy. Anyways, his younger brother, Alex. So just, again, a question for you. Just based on his look and how he acted and the timeline of this show, who do you think this character reminded you of? Who do you think? What was the inspiration for this character?
Oh, I don't know, man.
I'm going to tell you right now what I think. Bart Simpson.
Oh yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense, actually. And now you mention it with the slingshot and being the sort of a jackass kid, that adds up.
I mean, Bart Simpson's a pretty smart kid. He's pretty clever. He's pretty, he's a little shit disturber. So this guy seemed to be acting kind of the same way. As he had the slingshot, as you mentioned, and dressed like a cross between Bart Simpson and Dennis the Menace, who Bart Simpson was kind of based off of originally anyways. So that's the first thing I thought when I saw this guy. I said, oh God, here comes Bart Simpson. And I wasn't far off.
Yeah, that's really interesting. No, hey, that might have been a good movie, man. Bart Simpson versus the Leprechaun.
Yeah, they might have done it in The Simpsons. Who knows? So we get to the dimwit of the movie, Ozzy. We can call him Ozzy. We can call him Porkins. I don't know what you prefer. I think
prefer Porkins, actually, now that you mention it.
Because if we call
him... He lasts longer than Porkins, so good for him.
Yeah, but
if we should call Porkins Ozzy.
Maybe that actually would work better for Porkins. But I thought Porkins would do Ozzy a service, top men. You know what I mean? So it's like... Top men. So, as essentially the scene, everyone just gets introduced to each other. These guys are painting the house that Tori and her father are staying at. So when Porkins, or Ozzy, goes into the basement, he accidentally releases the leprechaun. So I thought I wanted to ask you, what did you think of this scene when the leprechaun was finally released? What'd you think of the effects? Did you think you got a better look at the leprechaun, his prosthetics, his costume? Like, what were your initial thoughts here?
Yeah, the effects were fine. I thought the look at the leprechaun himself, the makeup effects on Warwick Davis, were really solid. Didn't look too fake or cheesy. Actually, he doesn't look scary or really anything, but pretty effective there. Effects are what they were for the time, but I didn't find them overly cheesy or terrible.
Yeah, I agree. I thought for the movie it was pretty good. I completely agree. I think the costume and the prosthetics for Warwick Davis to be the leprechaun were top notch in my opinion. I thought they did some really good work in there. Just again, some little bit of trivia is I think they had an initial design for the leprechaun and they went to the studios and then they said, nope, make it more scary, put some more money into it. So I think a lot of the budget went into Warwick Davis's costume and the makeup and prosthetics, and I think it paid off. It was well done. The only thing here is I didn't like this scene at all, like him being released out of the crate. I mean, I did like the hand coming out of the crate, even though it was so telegraphed you could see it coming a mile away. But when he was released, it wasn't scary at all. And it seemed really forced, like, oh, I'm going to bite off your ear if you don't give me that gold. And it's just like, this was not a very good introduction. They could have done it a lot better here. Yeah, that's just my thoughts. I
totally agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't work at all. And I think that was a key pivotal moment of the film when he finally gets released, and it just was not done right at all in this point. So then we go back outside, and another thing I noticed here is the poor attention to detail and the piss poor directing. Is you see Nathan and Tori starting to paint, and they only have these very even brush strokes of paint on their arms. They're not blotches, they're not drops. They're actual, like someone took a paintbrush and say, I'm going to make a mark on your arm this long, another one on this arm. I got nothing on your face. I got nothing on your clothes. So it looks to me that Jennifer Aniston already got her way back then. You can't get any on my face or clothes. I wonder how many times she had to say that.
That was in her previous career. Not the face. That's, a lovely lady, I'm sure that she is. I did notice that about the paint, though. So it's interesting that you say, I think, it's one of those things that guys like us notice, the sort of small details like that really do contribute to the overall makeup of a film, whether you can buy into it or those details that are so engineered that they start pulling you out of the experience.
Yeah, and this was something that just like, instead of me paying attention to the dialogue, I paid attention to that. And it's just like shocking. It's like, come on, put at least a little bit of effort into it. So that's crazy. Anyways, that was just something that hit me hard. And it's just like something so small shouldn't stand out, but it did. And it's just bad.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, because the Leprechaun is now released, now we get the cheesy rainbow that I was talking about. It just instantaneously appears over everybody outside the house. What did you think of that effect? I just want to know your thoughts here.
It's pretty silly at this point. I don't know if they're trying to play this part for laughs. Obviously, we're playing in this sandbox where the leprechaun is the scary guy here. So I suppose a rainbow is just par for the course, but it was a little goofy.
Oh yeah, it was beyond goofy.
It was a little goofy.
And it was a bad effect too. It was just like, that was laugh out loud. When I saw this, I spit out my drink. It was like, I was like, wow. You couldn't even do that right. It's like, geez Louise. And they did it right in the first scene. So it's like, you couldn't get it right here. This looked like 60s Star Trek effect. That's what it looked like to me.
That probably would have looked better, a 60s Star Trek effect.
Yeah,
here.
Maybe.
Yeah, it was pretty obvious. It wasn't very convincing.
No. Obviously, after this rainbow appears, Ozzy and Alex go try and find the end of the rainbow because Ozzy thinks he can find it, but, lo and behold, he actually does because it's the Leprechaun's magic. And they find the truck, but the gold just suddenly appears. Now, this is my problem with this movie and a question I have for you, Jeff. Can you make sense of any of this? Why did the gold just suddenly appear? I figured that this was the hiding place that O'Grady stashed the gold. So why did it just magically appear? I don't get this. Do you?
No, I was wondering the exact same thing. Like, did O'Grady hide? Is this where he hid the gold? I don't think so. Didn't he have the gold on him, right, when he had his stroke? So Did the Leprechaun make it appear? Because if he did, why wouldn't he just materialize it to himself? It didn't make any sense at all. It's just it's out of nowhere.
Yeah, completely out of nowhere. I didn't understand this at all. It made no sense because if the Leprechaun made it appear himself, he would just go find the gold and retrieve it. I don't get this. Makes no sense. So I think that's just something that I can't wrap my head around. It's, again, terrible story writing and directing.
Terrible here. You know what else is stupid about this scene is when they find the gold, and I think it was, Ozzy talking about, the Leprechaun, and, there's the kid, and it's like, oh, stop with all the Leprechaun stuff. We just found a bag of gold at the end of a rainbow. What do you mean stop with all the Leprechaun? It didn't make any sense. The character reaction was totally bonkers here.
No. And nothing made sense at this point. It was ridiculous. And then, Ozzy himself says, oh, I'm going to try and bite this gold piece. But then instead of biting it, he swallows it. And it's like, oh my good God. I'm just, at this point, this character, Ozzy, is just grating on me so much right now. I'm so tempted to stop watching, but, powered through it. So at this point, we're at the end of Act 1. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on this movie so far? Are there any highs? Is there anything you can take away from this movie so far for you?
I guess Jennifer Aniston's looking pretty good in this movie so far. Looking pretty good. But I'm confused at this point. What I'm wondering right now as the viewer is, what's the tone supposed to be here? Obviously, we already talked about it being a horror comedy, but it's not really hitting any jokes, and it's not hitting any scares. So what am I supposed to be feeling here as somebody watching this movie? Who's the audience for this film right now?
No, I agree. And I have the same exact feeling. Right now, this first act did absolutely nothing for me. I had to actually go stop the movie, refill my glass of whiskey just to get me through the rest of this. It's utter garbage at this point. I'm confused. It doesn't make sense. And most importantly, I agree with you. I am so lost on what the tone of this movie is going to be. So we'll see if Act 2 improves any more. So now we'll get into Act 2. So now that Ozzy and Alex have the gold, this gives an excuse for the Leprechaun to start his reign of terror. The first thing, again, going back to Jennifer Aniston, is the beginning of Act 2 is I was just thinking, man, what a lucky SOB work Davis was, because he gets to paw on Jennifer Aniston's leg. It's like underneath the truck. It's like, damn, I wish I was him. It's like, and he's like, I love the sound he makes. He goes, ah. It's so awesome. I was like, yes, I can relate.
And she's digging it too. That's the other funny part. She's digging it.
Yeah, I know.
It's definitely got a creep factor there, which is what they're playing for, but not that funny.
No, it's not that funny. But I did love after she gets scratched by the Leprechaun, I did love the guys, I think Nathan's reaction, and you let me paw your leg? And it's like, I'd have the same reaction. And I love it that the dad's just there and you see all of his reactions to this. And I did note that as one of the things I did like. It's like the dad's realizing is, oh, damn, she's getting it on. So, yeah. So afterwards,
I loved her dad. Yeah.
So at this point, Leprechaun bites the dad's hand, and they think it's an animal. While they're off at the hospital, this is the point where Ozzy and Alex go to the pawn shop to get the coin appraised. So at this point, we are going to first glimpse of the first ideas that is going to be one of the highlights of the movies for me is the Leprechaun's mode of transportation. So right now here, he starts off with just. Well, I got to take something out of this movie, right? So it's like here he starts off with just a tricycle.
Yeah.
Yeah, he starts off with just a tricycle.
Yeah,
so
it is the best part.
So when he's on the road, I think he's hitching a ride like Marty McFly style, or if he's doing it himself, there's an effect where the director has sped him up fast and his movements quickly for a comedic element. So what did you think of that effect, and did you enjoy it, and did you think it worked as a comedic element?
No, I didn't. I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit, but I hate that effect when they speed something up, even, sometimes for a laugh, sometimes it's just to try to actually legitimately give the illusion of speed, and it never does, right? Certain things just don't translate when you do it like that. So no, I thought it was pretty dumb.
I didn't like it here. I did like it later in the movie when they used it once, and I'll explain why when we get to it later. So it was interesting. I just wanted to know what your thoughts are there on that one. So now we're going to get to the first real death of the movie, the Leprechaun's first real kill, not counting Dan O'Grady's wife, who just fell backwards, which was stupid. Here's the pawn shop owner. So after Ozzy and Alex leave, he's alone in his shop. And of course, for some reason, he doesn't get worried that all of a sudden a tricycle appears out of nowhere and is moving within his shop. I did love that after he kind of scared him, the leprechaun was fascinated with his shoes, because I didn't know if you caught this, because he's a shoemaker by trade. So the first thing...
Shoemaker.
Yeah, he's a shoemaker. Is that the leprechaun myth or fairy tale that they're all shoemakers, or is it just this guy?
I don't know. I mean, that's got to be from somewhere. I didn't look it up. I actually thought it was one of the more interesting wrinkles to this character, though, because that obviously leads to an important part later on.
Yes. But it was funny thing is like the first thing that popped in my head, I always have these obscure things that come into my head when I watch movies like this, is like he's a shoemaker and he wants to shine his shoes. So I was thinking First Blood at the end in Sly's monologue. It's like, shine, please, shine. It's like, gonna go cruising till the wheels fall off.
To team these guys up.
Yeah. It's like, can't have a dirty shoe. So the leprechaun then kills the shop owner by pogo sticking onto his torso. So I have a question for you. I mean, I know you're not a big fan of horror movies. What did you think about this death? Did you like it? Was it creative? Was it gory? Was it too gory or not gory enough?
It was creative.
Yeah, it was creative.
I'm going to say definitely not gory enough. It was creative, but not gory enough. In a movie like this, I think you really need to play up some of those gruesome elements, because that's another source of getting a laugh. It was pretty lame, the level of carnage inflicted upon this poor bastard getting pogo sticked into oblivion. It needed a little more punch, I think.
Yeah, it did. And when I mentioned that some scenes needed reshoots for upping the gore, this was one of those scenes. So all of those close-up shots of him landing on his torso and puncturing his torso, those were reshoots. So you didn't see that in the original cut.
Oh,
so yeah.
Interesting.
But that's not not my favorite part. The kill is okay. I did love the cheesy nose scream. It's like, no. I love movies like that where it's like stupid, dumb movies and they play up the nose scream. It's great. that fit in well. But my favorite part actually is after the guy dies and he turns around and he trades up his mode of transportation. He sees the other car now. So now it's, to me, the first thing I think of, it's a Wario kart. It's like, I'm a Wario! It's like, you see him speeding down the road again, and it's like, do you think this was the inspiration for Mario Kart? Because this little guy's got everything.
Well, maybe if he was like shooting Lucky Charms out of the cart, you could say, it was a pretty boss ride. Let's face it, coming down the highway and that thing, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. And again, you get that speed up effect, because obviously this car is not moving fast. So they have to.
And I think that the effect is working better here, right? Speeding them up now, for whatever reason on the road, I think it hits a little bit better now than it did before on the tricycle.
Yes. So the leprechaun's on his way back home because he has this Wario kart. He gets pulled over by a cop, and of course the hilarity ensues. So I'll just let you you can describe the scene and think, what did you think about the scene with the cop and the chase through the woods? Did it work for you? What were your initial thoughts?
I did laugh at this scene, but this guy's an idiot though, isn't he? This cop? I mean, I don't know that I'm chasing a funny little man through the woods who obviously has magic powers. And then when he thinks he's kind of ran away, he's all bloodied and he's had his face kind of ripped into by this guy, by the leprechaun's claws. And he just sort of sits and chills against a tree, relaxes, has a bit of a chuckle.
Yeah, but then you know what he says? Because he chuckles. He's in on the joke. He goes, no more. No more. That's how I was feeling with this scene. It was like, it was too long.
That's how I was feeling.
Yeah, it was tired. It was played. It just dragged on for a bit there. I think what would have worked is when the Leprechaun actually dropped his hat. It would have been kind of cool, even if they could have pulled it off in a low budget way, if maybe when the cop picked up the hat, the Leprechaun's hand popped out of the hat, like in a magician in a sense. That little bit of trickery there would have been better instead of just him, oh, here I am above you. I'm going to now headlock you with my thighs and rip off your face. So, I mean, he didn't even do that. He just like broke his neck. So
yeah, there's not a lot of creativity to that kill there. I mean, breaking his neck. Yeah. That's pretty lame for a movie of this type to do that. It's too simple. There's not enough gore. It's not funny. It's not scary. And you had a good point there, with the hat. Maybe if this like hand comes out or something with the trickery, because obviously he's got all these magic tricks up his sleeve. It makes more sense if he would use some of that when he's preying on his victims. That would have been a lot more fun.
Yeah, and maybe the budget played into play here, right? So, who knows? But I think you could have pulled that off even without special effects. You could have just had a hand pop through the hat or do something like that, So, yeah. So now the cop is dead. The Leprechaun goes back to the O'Grady house to look for his gold because he only has the one piece from the pawn shop owner. But he can't find it. And after everyone comes back to the house, the Leprechaun then starts making noises and torments them, finally reveals himself to them. And this whole section here is our first little bit of the traditional B-movie horror scares here. So the Leprechaun injures Nathan. Alex finally comes clean and says they stashed the gold in the well, so Tori then retrieves the gold, gives it back to the Leprechaun, but the Leprechaun still realizes there's a piece missing because Ozzy ate it. So just out of all of this, I just described actually quite a large chunk of what the movie is here, just in that little description. What is there anything of interest in you here throughout this set piece?
You watch horror movies and you're used to characters being stupid and making bad decisions. We were talking about the cop earlier, and he was just a whole bag of stupid decisions. And then Jennifer Aniston is like, he wants the gold? Shit, where's the gold? She goes and gets it and she gives it to him. Yeah. I actually found that pretty refreshing for a horror movie. It's like, that is the solution here. Give the guy his gold. So
yeah, you know what? You're right. You're right. That is actually refreshing. That's a good point. I never thought of it. She's the only one who's actually thinking smart, and let's just do the right thing so we can just end this. Yeah. You're right. That is something to take away from this. That is refreshing.
I'm glad when you're recording this. It's like, you're right. Now it's immortalized.
So for me, I'll just list a couple of things that I took notes from in this section that I did enjoy, because there are a few things I did like here. So I don't know if you noticed, but when the Leprechaun was rummaging through the house, he actually found the Lucky Charms cereal box.
Yeah, I did notice that.
Yeah, but they called it Lucky Clover, so I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah. And again, coming back to him being a shoemaker, again, he finds shoes and it just instantaneously goes into obsessive compulsive disorder. It just starts to shine the shoes because that's another weakness of his. And I believe at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, I saw a weak attempt at a George Lucas transitional wipe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you noticed that. And then, I wanted to note this down because it just shows the kind of idiots that we're dealing with here. I did take note that Nathan himself is also a dimwit, because when they come back and see the mess the Leprechaun makes and the shoes all shined, his first thought was, a bear did this. I was like, oh. Did you notice all the shoes? A bear did this.
That's a pretty considerate bear,
Yeah, that was hilarious. I couldn't believe he said that. I laughed out loud. It was a legitimate laugh. It's like, oh my God, these guys are truly idiots. So once the Leprechaun reveals himself, I did love the line. And this is one of them, like, for me, obscure movies are only, like, bad movies also are really only worth watching if you can also find them quotable. And this is one movie that I did like. So when Nathan is injured and they say, go get help, call for help. So Ozzy goes to the phone, calls the police, and this is his line. Help, help, it's happening. The attack is on. It's a leprechaun. Bring the army, bring the navy, bring medicine. Bye-bye. Oh my goodness. I was laughing pretty hard at that laugh. So continuing on what I liked about this scene. So after Ozzy says that, they go back outside and get into the truck, and then bam, all of a sudden the Leprechaun bursts out of the barn with another modified Wario cart. It's like, I'm Wario again.
That was great. He sure put that together in a hurry too, didn't he?
Oh, yes.
Just rolled in there. What parts are in that barn at this point here? This guy's making this super Mario Kart in there. It was good for the Leprechaun, man. It's one hell of a death machine that he with the pitchfork on the end. Oh
I know. It's great. It's great. I love how every time he gets into a new vehicle, it gets more vicious and aggressive. It's like, it gets bigger and more badass. I love that. So he ruins the truck. So they go again back inside, and we get another peekaboo chase going on in the kitchen and the hallway. I did get a chuckle out of the Leprechaun reaches out of a drawer and like squeezes Nathan's junk. It's like, I love Nathan's bad scream. He goes, ah! It's like,
he was hiding his enjoyment. It's like, I don't like it, but it's kind of tantalizing.
So I guess the final thing I did notice about the scene, and it is clever, and I think you mentioned it before, is the one way they got out of dealing with the Leprechaun so they could get to the nursing home to get O'Grady or find out information from him is they escaped by throwing shoes to distract the Leprechaun. Yeah. I thought that was clever, and I liked that scene. It's like a shoe shine. Oh, I love First Blood, but I just keep thinking about that.
Oh, man. You know what? That is actually a piece of character development here for the Leprechaun. You know, being an obsessive compulsive about it, it's kind of a neat thing to throw in, and it gives the our team of heroes, if you want to credit them with that, a way to deal with the supernatural menace.
Yeah, I think it's clever. I did genuinely like this scene. I liked it. Yeah. No, and you're right. It gives them with a way of dealing with something they have no chance of really dealing with mano a mano, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So this is the end of Act 2 here, Jeff. What are your thoughts at this point in the movie? Did Act 2 improve things for you? Is there anything you can take away from this movie at this point?
Things get dumber here in Act 2. The action ratchets up. Got a couple of deaths which have been underwhelming so far, both in the number and intensity of. So kind of disappointing there. You know, like I said, I mean, Jennifer Aniston sort of making a smart decision in a horror movie was kind of refreshing. So that's the best thing to take away. The dumbest decision made by Terry's low-rent Hugh Jackman father after she gets scratched by the Leprechaun under the car there, and they go chasing through the woods. And he hears a cat meowing, so he thinks it's a cat. And the guy sticks his hand into this dark tree stump. Like, come on, man. Even if that is actually a cat in there, we're in a horror movie here. So as a viewer, obviously, we're supposed to feel tension here. But even if that's just a cat, an injured cat in there, and that guy's reaching into this dark hole to grab an injured cat, you're going to the hospital, buddy.
Yeah. It's pretty stupid. I do agree. I think for me at this point, there are only really two highlights. You mentioned, and I didn't realize this before, so thank you for mentioning, is Jennifer Aniston doing something refreshing and trying to provide a legitimate solution to this problem by giving him the gold. And then the other thing is just the vehicles for the modes of transportation, the Mario Karts for the Leprechaun. It was genuinely funny. I did like those scenes. But yeah, at this point, Act 2 is not much of an improvement. Again, it's still trying to figure out its tone, as we had talked about earlier, and we'll see if Act 3 has any more improvements. But I'm not essentially really liking or taking away too much from this movie at this point. So Act 3 begins as Tori gets to the hospital to get O'Grady's help. Again, we have the scenes here where there's a bit of a chase. She finds the Leprechaun there. O'Grady's dead, but almost dead. And just before he dies, he tells her that she needs to get the 4-leaf clover. And then there's a little chase. So again, did you take away anything from this set piece here, the hospital?
Not really. Pretty ho-hum for me at this point. The dumbness is starting to wear on me.
Yeah, I agree. There is absolutely nothing in this set piece that I like. It's just a way for them to find the solution. And it's just dumb. I will point out two things that I did notice is once the Leprechaun starts chasing her in the hospital halls in the wheelchair, I swear there was like repetitive shots over and over again. Like he was going around the same corner like 3 times, and it was the same him lip smacking as like, come here, my sweet. It was like, are they taking a page from how Itchy and Scratchy cartoons are produced here? So
I mean, you know what? And Itchy and Scratchy cartoons are produced with a lot more creativity. And here it just feels like the filmmakers are bored. I mean, they know they don't have any money, but they don't seem to be overcoming any difficulties with any creativity. They're just being lazy. They're not playing anything here for a good laugh or a good scare or both, which is, you know, what the tone of the movie is obviously going for. So, you know, when you're in the third act, it's time to start ratcheting up the intensity, the tension, and they're just not doing it right now. It's not working.
No, it gets even lazier because now they race back to the O'Grady place, and surprise, surprise, he has his own 4-leaf clover patch there. And to make it even much better for the characters, all of a sudden, out of the blue, this patch starts glowing green in the dark so they can find it.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously we're dealing with mystical forces here, but who's on their side to make the clover patch glow green in the night? Or is that just for our benefit so that, you know, the viewer can see it? Or do they see it glowing? I'm a little confused. I mean, clover patches are pretty common, I guess, but I don't know.
Yeah.
They're telegraphing pretty heavily what's going to be happening here.
No, I agree. And I don't know if that's for the audience's sake or for the character's sake that it's glowing. And it gets even worse. Ozzy comes in because she can't find it, a 4-leaf one at first. And Ozzy comes in and goes, "You've got to believe."
Yeah.
And it's like, stupid Ozzy, tricks are for kids. You know, it's like, that's what I felt like saying at that point. And it's like, you've got to believe. And the next thing that popped in my mind is like Sean Connery's just like, "You've got to believe, boy." So only the penitent bands will pass, right? It's like, it's like, oh man, it's just terrible. This, you know, gotta believe it'll come true, and it does. So, you know, now we're at the climax and resolution of the film. So they use the 4-leaf clover to take care of the leprechaun. So what Alex does is he channels Bart Simpson and uses the wad of gum to, you know, tape or stick the 4-leaf clover on and shoots it with a slingshot in the leprechaun's mouth. He falls down the well, and then Nathan pours the gasoline down and blows it up. So it's pretty abrupt at this point. I know there's a bit more where he bites Ozzy's ear a little bit, and Ozzy all of a sudden is ready to die a hero and all that stuff. But what did you think of this rushed climax here? Is there anything that you liked out of this point here?
I actually like the slingshotting the 4-leaf clover down the leprechaun's gullet. I thought that was kind of fun, actually, because I didn't expect the kid to be the hero here, right? You expect Jennifer Aniston to be the one to vanquish the leprechaun, and basically the kid's just like, "Fuck this," and he just shoots him. Yeah, it's like Indiana Jones pulling out the gun and shooting out with the knife. Like, fuck it, boom, right?
Yeah, and he even gives the typical 80s one-liner, like, "Fuck you, Lucky Charms." And it's,
yeah. I got a giggle out of that. Yeah.
I thought I would have, but, you know, it just seemed a bit forced. It was just something that I think at this point of the movie I was starting to get a little tired.
Come on, man. A line like "fuck you, Lucky Charms" doesn't... I'm framing that one. Printing it out and I'm hanging it on my wall.
Your new ringtone. There you go.
That's my new ringtone.
The one thing I did notice and I did like is the effects of the leprechaun Muppet as he was melting after he got shot with the clover in the mouth. You know, he started to actually physically melt. I like that Muppetry effect there. Of course, they ruined it again as he comes back up, and it's supposed to be a scary scene, but somebody hits him over the head with a goofy shotgun handle, and he falls back down. And that's when the movie just abruptly ends. The well blows up. Police come 1 second later, and you get the voiceover. It's like, "I'll be back." And then the end. Cue credits. So that's it.
That was abrupt, wasn't it? I mean, it's almost like they ran out of physical film to shoot with.
Probably.
Like, well, shit. Like, I guess we're good, guys. Like, we're done. Like, we ran out of film.
We ran out of film. We ran out of money, and you know.
Yeah.
So I guess we're here at the end of the movie. So closing thoughts. So I'll let you go first, Jeff.
Sure.
Considering the genre and the type of movie this is, what did you think of Leprechaun? Can you give this movie any kind of recommendation? Is there anything here that you liked? Was this too bad of a movie to get through?
I'm going to say, now that we're through the movie and I'm done watching it, it's time for me to celebrate. And this Irish whiskey here is a nice closer to the film. Not a whole lot to take out. Obviously, there were some goofy parts here that we kind of got a chuckle out of here and there. There's a genre of movie that people enjoy watching, like the so bad it's good. I don't think it falls into that. It's lazy. The kills weren't inventive or gory. The laughs didn't really hit. Problems with the tone. The biggest question I had is, who's this movie for? Let me ask you that question, Harry. Who's this movie for?
Nobody. It's for nobody.
Yeah, it is for nobody. I mean, I'm thinking that, maybe enjoyable for like 10 to 12-year-olds, but that's a curious audience for what is an R-rated movie. So it doesn't hit for adults. It's too much. It's an R-rated movie, so it can't be for kids. No real laughs, no real thrills or scares. I'm going to have to bury the Leprechaun in that well.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I wrote the same thing down. It's like, by Grapthar's hammer, I cannot recommend this movie at all. I mean, this is not a gem. This is not a rare antiquity, even for the genre. And as we mentioned before, and you mentioned it first, you can't find an identity for this movie. Is it a horror, or is it a horror comedy? I felt the movie needed a lot more scares, even for it to be passable as a horror, considering after the research, I mean, I'm not surprised by this, that they had to go back and refilm some of the gorier scenes. To me, tells me all I need to know of what they're what their intention was to begin with. They really didn't know. I also read that Mark Jones, his inspiration for doing this movie was by sitting down and eating a bowl of Lucky Charms cereal. So I think that explains it all. The only thing I like about that is it does give me hope that one day I can make a movie myself. If this Joe Sixpack just, starts eating a bowl of Lucky Charms and says, "Hey, I'm going to make a movie about a leprechaun," maybe I've got a shot at something in the future.
Yeah, man. We can make Snap, Crackle, and Pop.
Well, I want Count Chocula or Frankenberry. It's like, 1, he eats another guy. 2, I'm sure there's a lot of other ideas. How about C-3POs? It's like,
oh, there you go.
Remember those cereals when we were a kid?
Absolutely. I remember the C-3POs, man. We could make a horror movie there. For sure.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been Sugar Smacks versus C-3POs, right? You never know.
Yeah, we get like crossovers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The cereal championships. You never know.
The shared cinematic cereal universe.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing I really have to ask you, Jeff, is knowing that this movie has spawned off more sequels, would you ever be interested in watching one of those in the future?
Based on some of the titles, there might be some laughs to be had here, but considering that this one was a theatrical release and it's pretty terrible and everything else is direct to video, I don't know. I don't think there's probably a lot of value to be seen. Is Warwick Davis in the rest of them, or is they find another?
No, he is, except until the reboot. Then they've rebooted it. Yeah. Maybe there's some laughs to be had there, but no, I think that this is best left buried in some peat bog somewhere in Ireland. And, I wouldn't mind checking out like Leprechaun in the Hood.
I was going to say Leprechaun in the Hood might be the only one I'd consider watching.
Yeah, it's like him versus Ice-T, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that'd be interesting.
Maybe probably all just stoned for 90 minutes and that's the movie,
Hey, you know what, man? You never know. It might work. I think the other thing that I can think of this movie, it's worth mentioning, is I actually genuinely liked Warwick Davis's performance as the Leprechaun. I mean, he didn't have much to work with, and considering the director and the script, I actually did find him to be enjoyable to watch. If he had better material and it was a better movie, I thought the laughs could have been better, and I thought he could have been more scary, but I really don't pin the fault on him. He did an adequate job for what he was given.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there too. His performance was the most compelling piece of the movie for sure. He was having fun with the material. You could tell he sold it. The makeup effects were great. If the material had been scarier, I think he could have had a little bit more to play with. But certainly you can't lay the blame at his feet. He was, I don't want to say the word good, but he's certainly the most effective piece of the film.
Yes, I agree. I think we can agree on that. But in the end, I can't recommend this as something to watch. It's no gem. It's no rare antiquity. So that's it. That's it for today. That does it for Leprechaun. So Jeff, do you have our next pick?
Well, yes, I do. And I did some searching to keep in spirit of the podcast and an underappreciated gem. But you know what? People who underappreciate movies this good make me furious. Starring Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, and a bunch of other guys.
Yes!
The original superhero action comedy, Mystery Men.
Yes, a great pick. That's a good one. That's a good one. I can't wait to dive into that one. It's been a while since I've seen that one as well, so that'll be good.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. So that does it for episode 3 and our analysis on Leprechaun. Hope to see you guys again next time.
All right.
Cheers.
The song of the Emerald Isle. Ah, 'tis like the singing of the angels themselves.